Carlotta is the first 5-star character revealed for Wuthering Waves patch 2.0, and oh man are they starting off strong. Carlotta's kit reveals to us that Kuro Games has clearly not run out of ideas, but you obviously don't know yet. That is why in this video I'm going to be explaining Carlotta's full kit, starting with her basic attacks. Well, normally her basic attack is just 2 hits of damage, but they'll be enhanced once you possess any amount of malleable crystals. But how do you get these malleable crystals? Well, there's a bunch of ways. First of all, you could just do her second basic attack, but I don't think this is the way to go. I think the way you should go is by using her skill, which will give her free stacks immediately. You can also get 3 more stacks by using her heavy attack, and since the heavy attacks for pistol characters are so fast, this would be a pretty good way to get malleable crystals. You also get them by successfully dodging, or using a special attack you get after landing from an aerial attack. But the ways I would recommend getting malleable crystals is with her skill or with her heavy attack. Speaking of her skill, we're going to go to that one next. Like I said before, casting it will give you 3 stacks of malleable crystal, but it will also do damage and will apply the prismatic effect to enemies, which will make them freeze for 1.5 seconds. This is very useful because as a gun character, she's not really able to parry that effectively. So being able to stop enemies from moving at all, even if for a short amount of time, is pretty nice. After casting her skill, you can also cast her skill again to consume all of her malleable crystals, which will give her part of her Forte bar. Speaking of her Forte bar, this one's quite a funny one. She has 120 stacks of essence. You will be able to get 30 from her intro skill, and for every malleable crystal you consume, whether with her skill or with her enhanced basics, will also restore 10 essence. Once you have 60, you will be able to use a special heavy attack called Restrictive Strategy. Restrictive Strategy is able to reduce her skill's cooldown by 6 seconds, allowing you to get more malleable crystals. But once every 22 seconds, Carlotta will be able to enter Gilded Crystal, which will enhance her heavy attack even further into Terminal Execution. It's essentially going to be the same, it just has a higher damage. However, after using Terminal Execution, the Gilded Crystal will go on cooldown again. Moving on to her Resonance Liberation, this is going to be where a lot of her damage is going to lie. She will do Glacio damage in an area, and she will apply the Dissolution effect to enemies, and she will also enter the Gunflower Waltz state. This is usable in mid-air, and the damage counts as Resonance skill damage. The Dissolution effect that it applies will allow Carlotta to ignore 18% of enemy defense. Now, while in the Gunflower Waltz state, pressing basic attack will have Carlotta cast Death Omen, and each Death Omen will grant 1 reflective foil. Once you have 4 stacks of it, pressing the basic attack button again, or her Resonance Liberation, will activate Lethal Finale, which is a very large nuke of damage counting as Resonance skill damage. Entering or exiting Gunflower Waltz will reset all of your essence from the Forte circuit, however, and considering your intro skill gives it, that means they expect you to use 1 heavy attack before you enter her ultimate state. During Gunflower Waltz, you're also unable to use your Restrictive Strategy or Terminal Execution heavy attacks. After using Lethal Finale, the Gunflower Waltz state will end. This isn't stated anywhere within the description, so it is just a guess of mine, but if it didn't cancel the Gunflower Waltz, it would be way too broken, so that's why I say that. Then moving on to her intro skill, it's just going to deal Glacio damage and restore 30 essence, and her outro skill will just do a lot of damage, like there's not much here to say. As for her inherent skill, after using Carlotta's second skill cast, so you skill and then skill again, performing a mid-air attack will grant her damage immunity and give her interruption immunity until landing, and it will also reduce the stamina consumption for aerial movements by 20%. This isn't really going to be that useful, but it's there, I guess. It's trying to incentivize you to use her special aerial attack, but trust me, you won't. And then for her second inherent skill, it will allow her to apply the Dissolution effect, which is the 18% defense ignore, by using her intro skill, second stage of her Resonance skill, her Death Omen from her Resonance Liberation, or her Terminal Execution heavy attack. This ultimately makes it so she has a 100% uptime on the disassociation effect, which is very good. Personally, I think this kit is going to be really fun to mess around with. Not only are you going to be in your liberation state, you're also going to spend plenty of time outside of it. So that means you're clearly gonna be doing quite a lot of varied stuff instead of spamming the same button over and over again. But before I want to head into Carlotta's signature weapon and her sequences, I would like to talk about her new Sonata effect, aka her new Echo set. The two-piece will give 12% skill damage. It's clear that Carlotta is focusing a lot on skill damage, so it makes sense that she would be getting more of it in her two-piece. Her 5-piece, however, oh boy. After casting your Resonance Liberation, you'll gain 30% Resonance skill damage, as well as 30% Glacio damage, which lasts for 6 seconds. And considering the fact that you will use your Liberation to both enter and exit her enhanced mode, you might as well have 100% uptime on this. This is a very strong set, and I recommend everyone who wants Carlotta to farm this. Every single one of you. Farm it, please, I'm begging you. As for her best teammate, it should be obvious that it's just gonna be Zhezha. Let's be completely honest with ourselves, it's Zhezha. Does she have an alternative? Not really. Lumi and Tachi are not really that great at buffing, because their field time is very long, which means that if you don't have a Zhezha, you're probably gonna have to stick with Sanhua, which is by no means optimal, like at all. And I think ultimately this is gonna be a pretty big deal for Carlotta. If you don't have Zhezha, it's gonna be pretty hard to think of something else to use with her. Another issue I can see being the case with Carlotta is her AoE. She doesn't really have that much AoE from what I've seen from her attacks, but I could just be straight up wrong, who knows. Now diving into her signature weapon. It has a base attack of 500 and will give 72% crit damage. It will give also a 12% attack at flat. When you trigger an intro skill or a Resonance Liberation, you will gain 48% Resonance skill damage. This effect lasts for 5 seconds and can be refreshed by performing the action again. Not much else to say about this weapon other than it's pretty good. And also, I would just like to say, I'm probably going to be using this on my Mortefi and Elusive Realm. I'm definitely pulling for this weapon as well because I like Carlotta. Anyway, moving on to her sequences. The first one will make it so that her intro skill will give her pretty extra malleable crystals, and it will give her 30% Glacio damage bonus for 15 seconds. And also, the second stage of her skill, if it hits an enemy under the prismatic effect, it will recover 30 essence. This means that by simply using your intro skill and your second stage of your skill, you should be just restoring 60 essence immediately. But because the skill gives free malleable crystals, and the intro skill will also give free, it means you can actually do free basic attacks, and then immediately do a heavy attack, and then you can use your skill and do another heavy attack. So that seems pretty nice if you ask me. As for the S2, attacks on enemies affected by the Dissolution effect, which is her Def Ignore, she will gain 15% crit rate and 20% crit damage on them. That's a pretty good amount of stats, and it's gonna have essentially 100% uptime. As for the third, after casting her outro skill, she will do an additional hit of damage, which is essentially just the same as her regular outro skill damage. Her Terminal Execution heavy attack will also have its multiplier increased by 80%, which is very strong if you ask me. The S4, after casting any sort of heavy attack, whether it be the regular, restrictive strategy, or Terminal Execution, will increase Carlotta's basic attack damage bonus, and also for the rest of her teammates by 25%. This is mainly good for buffing Zhezha, but considering the fact that Carlotta also has her own enhanced basic attacks, I wouldn't say it's entirely useless, although I do wish it was skill damage instead. S5 will make it so Carlotta's attack is increased by 10% for 20 seconds after casting her Resonance skill. This is really disappointing, but that might possibly be because the text could be incomplete. We are still very early into the beta after all. And then finally for the S6, the damage of her basic attacks within her ult stance will be essentially doubled, and enemies hit with these attacks will be unable to move for 1 second or until damaged, essentially locking them still so that they cannot move. While this is not really as good for damage as S6s usually tend to be, it definitely does solve some of the usability issues that come with gun characters. I'm personally going to be pulling for an S0R1 Carlotta, but what about you? Are you excited for Carlotta? Do you like how her kit looks? I can definitely say I'm pretty excited for her, and I know that she is going to be strong based on my current analysis of her kit, but how strong isn't completely clear yet. I don't think she's going to be as good as Jinchi, but definitely as good of a contender as Camellia is, and she doesn't really have the issue of being locked in place. So, personally, I have high hopes for Carlotta, but that'll be it from me. Peace.